Here we are with Gary Greenberg. He is the author of The Beer Diet, How to Drink Beer and Not Gain Weight. This is like the answer to so many of our prayers. Now, this gentleman is not just an author, he's a journalist. He comes from Penn State, where he will tell you himself that he majored in rugby, beer, and girls, as well as getting a degree in journalism. So that's pretty cool. He's been reviewed by companies such as the Forbes List, the National Examiner, the Miami New Times. He's written several books, and this man is definitely someone who knows what he's talking about when it comes to the area of health. I know a lot of people probably think this isn't the real deal, but this is a completely serious interview about a really intriguing topic. He has also done over 300 articles in the health related field. So it's not just about a guy that drinks beer. It's a man that's done quite a lot of research. He has several books I'll let him tell you about later. But right now, I'd like to introduce Gary and just talk about this sensational book that was reviewed by the Forbes List called The Beer Diet, How to Drink Beer and Not Gain Weight. Take it away, Gary. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's not something I just wrote about. It's something that I live. And people would always ask me, how can you drink so much beer and still be so slim?
Right?
And I decided at some point to write a book about it because I figured that if I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's the truth for most things, right? I think that we, especially people like us, when we find something we love, we want to share it because we want the cliff notes too. If you know something that will help me, please let me know. So I think this is fascinating. I love beer, by the way. I'm a huge beer drinker. I'm from Massachusetts, and they have some of the best brews, in my opinion, out there. They had like microbrews before it was a thing. And I don't mean like the Sam Adams stuff, not that I'm putting it down, but they have Berkshire Brewery, for instance, and Paper House Brewery. And they came out in the 90s, which was great timing for me because I was in college. And I dated a rugby guy, so I know you guys drink a lot of beer and shoot the boot and all kinds of antics that went around playing rugby and then celebrating the game.
It's also to kill the pain after playing, because when you play 80 minutes of full contact sport without pads, you need a little bit of anesthetizing when you finish, and that's how you start drinking beer. And I always had a pretty good taste in beer. I always preferred imported beers, and that eventually led into the craft beers, which are obviously very high alcohol and high calorie. Mm-hmm. So they're a problem. But it's interesting that I never thought that women would be that interested in my book, but as it turns out, there's a lot of women like you who are drinking more and more of this high potency beers. And I think women are a little bit more concerned about their weight than guys. So the book really is appealing to women too.
It is. For as far as I'm concerned, when I started drinking too many of the home brews, I would feel like, oh no, I can feel my jeans getting tighter. But you and I met at a nutrition conference, actually. So we have a company that we're aligned with, that's where we met, and they incorporated some incredible, I would say, secrets, because I think you should read the book on how to balance some of our eating habits and some of drinking habits. And I think you got pretty educated in that front. And I know people are going to have the big question of how do I do it, right? And what's your answer to how do I drink beer and not gain weight?
Well, like you said, you'll have to read the whole book to figure it out. And what works for me, my book is kind of a blueprint on how I did it. And what works for me, might or might not work for you, but you can have some tips. And if things don't quite work for you, you can adjust them. But I would say the number one key for anybody, whether they drink beer or not, is to take responsibility for your own health. Plenty of resources available online. You can't believe everything.
Well, getting educated, I think, is probably the better thing. Like, get educated about how to get rid of those things, and that's what this book does: is getting more educated.
Right, and you got to also understand it's very personalized, because what's good for one person isn't always good for another.
Right.
But I started because when I hit my mid 40s, I started putting on a pound or two a year. And by the time I was always been about 155. And when I hit my, 10 years later, I was pushing 170. And I said, I got to do something about that. And that's about the time we got into isogenics. And I started doing some of those things. We lost the weight. and I've managed to keep it off.
You're disciplined too. I know you do a cleanse like once a week, right? You do a cleanse on Mondays.
Yeah, Mondays are pretty bad days in general because you have to go back to work, and I figured why not make it worse. And I do every day. I fast from Sunday night until Tuesday morning, basically. And I'm so used to it now. It doesn't faze me. It's not a problem.
You are my hero. So what makes you, let's talk about your background a little bit. What makes you the authority on nutrition, or maybe just the beer diet? I know that I touched upon this in your intro, but people tend to come a little bit later on our Facebook lives. What makes you so educated about nutrition or the beer diet?
Well, and being a journalist, I've covered everything from community news to sports to international travel, just about everything that you could do. But I was actually working for the tabloids, the National Enquirer, Globe Magazine, and those places. And they were based in Boca Raton, and they left town in 2015. So I started freelancing, and the first gig I got was doing some natural health stories, and I just stuck with it. So over the past 5 years, I've written more than 300, well more than 300 articles that have all been published about natural health. And it's about nutrition, it's about exercise, it's about the science of it, it's about cellular health, which is really key, because if you learn how to keep your cells healthy, you don't have to worry about organ problems like heart disease, Alzheimer's, liver disease, whatever. Diabetes is also an organ problem to a degree. So, that's where I got educated about all this stuff. And I've talked to, when I do interviews, I interview some of the smartest people in the world. I mean, the scientists that are world renowned and willing to talk to me about what they know. And it's just fascinating. I just recently did a story on vegetable oils and these omega-6 fats that are in vegetable oils, and we're way out of balance between our omega-6 and omega-3s.
Yeah.
I talked to this guy, Bill Lands, who's 90 years old. He's been studying these things for 60 years.
Wow.
And he's explained to me why the science keeps changing, and that's a whole nother story, but he's seen it all from the time, in the 60s and 70s where saturated fats were bad, and then suddenly it was cholesterol that was bad, and
right.
Now it's oxidative stress that's causing it. So they keep changing what's causing heart disease.
Well, this is the problem. And I think when you say take responsibility for your health, I always want to say get educated, because the problem I feel in the nutrition field, and I have a degree in nutrition and exercise physiology, and I just was telling you that degree was probably the worst information I ever gained was in university about nutrition in the 90s. I love to tell the story that the head of the nutrition department was morbidly obese, and that to me was a real bad sign that whatever the information we were getting probably wasn't working. And they were, back then, was all carbs. They totally were okay with diet everything. Sugar was not a big deal. It was all about no fat whatsoever in your diet, like striking the fat, a little bit of protein. And then I went to the gyms and I would see these people that were really fit and look good, and they would tell me the exact opposite, like high protein, no sugar. And there was a real disconnect. But as you're mentioning, there is a change constantly in science, because I think they isolate a little too much and they don't put the bigger picture involved. For example, when you mention cholesterols or saturated fats, they were telling us margarine was good for us for a long time because there was no cholesterol, and then the trans fatty acid ended up being way worse for our heart. So
right, yes.
And then I go back to one really basic thing, is like natural stuff is probably better for you. And beer is like, from when did beer get brewed? From the beginning of time? Did they just, like Adam and Eve, started a brewery?
Well, I don't think it was quite that far back, although it depends. Beer actually got its start around 12,000 years ago when cavemen started to farm. So these Neolithic farmers, grew grain. And when the grain was left out in tubs of sometime and got wet and sat in these tubs and it was wet, natural yeast would come through the air and ferment it.
Wow.
And it probably tasted pretty bad, but the first guy who drank it probably got a good buzz from it and said, hey, this stuff's worthwhile.
I did not know that. That's very
So
interesting.
beer's been around longer than wine, longer than just about anything. You know, bread and beer probably were the first foods that man actually produced rather than just gathered and hunted up.
And they used to drink beer. I remember hearing, tell me if this is correct information, that they used to drink beer rather than water back in England when that was kind of the epicenter of the universe, because they would say that the water was contaminated, but the beer with the alcohol must have killed some of the bacterias or something like this.
Yeah, I bring that up in the opening of my book, and like a lot of common knowledge, it's kind of inaccurate.
Tell me
Um,
more.
the people in those days were sophisticated enough to know to boil water that had pathogens in it. But beer was widely used by them because it was an energy drink. Beer provides energy because of the carbs. So it was a good energy drink for these guys who would have to work from dawn till dusk and manage to maintain energy all day without having a heck of a lot to eat.
No, that's a very good point. So, what I did read when I started your book, I remember laughing out loud several times. I had the privilege of seeing one of the first copies that you were producing, and I was like, the first couple chapters, I just started laughing. It's such a refreshing way to write. I really felt like when I was reading the book, I could hear your voice, and it really felt like and not just an education, but more like education slash entertainment, but in a real sense. Like it wasn't fake. It was all real good information, but it was done in such a delightful manner.
Well, I think that's key. You know, when you were a kid and you had a teacher, which teacher with a fun made learning fun? You know, which teachers worked best? It was the ones who made you laugh, who kept you entertained. Uh, and that's one real luxury I have with this book. When I write my regular stories, I have to kind of do it as a straight man. I mean, I pretty
Right.
much still have a little bit of that style in there, but when I write my own book or my own stuff, I have a very humorous voice, a little bit snarky, and I've used it throughout my career. I used to write a column when I was a reporter on Key Biscayne called Tropical Debris, and I won all the awards. I won all the humorous column awards, and uh, the people loved that column more than anything.
I love it. So, as far as this book goes, I feel like everybody should be reading that, and I want to get back to this book before we wrap up. But I do want to touch upon the other books that you've written because I think it's important. They're totally so varied. The first one, though, health related, chelation, which is extra heavy metals, correct? That are being taken out
Yeah,
of the body. Tell me
I
more.
got one called the Chelation Revolution. It was published last year by Humanix Books. And chelation is a way to get heavy metals out of your system. There's almost no other way to do it. And these heavy metals, which a lot of doctors will say, oh, there's in such trace amounts, they really won't affect your health. But we're learning more and more that even minimal levels, trace levels of things like iron, mercury, cadmium, uh, arsenic, they're really, perverse. They're in our environment everywhere. And we have them in our bodies. And for some people, they can process them pretty effectively, but most of us don't. They don't stay in your bloodstream, they go into your tissue and they just stay there. So, and they can disrupt these enzyme reactions, which make your cells work.
Right.
And it's most prominent with heart disease. And there's been studies done now that show that chelation will help clear out arteries. So,
Wow.
or at least
What
prevent some forms of heart disease.
What do you think is the main, if there is a main place that people are getting those heavy metal toxicities? I know it's all in our environment, but is there one place that you would say, that place is probably the worst? Is it canned
Well,
food or
the worst thing is smoking cigarettes. That's the
for
worst.
heavy metals?
Yeah, yeah. It's got
Okay.
all of them in there.
They can
It's got
smoke. Can they smoke everything else, just not cigarettes?
I haven't heard anything about weed, but I would imagine anything you bring into your lungs is not going to be great for your lungs. But I don't. It depends how contaminated they are too. I mean, tobacco and cigarettes are so
Right.
processed.
I'm surprised they have metals in them, though. I wouldn't have thought cigarettes would have metals in
Yeah,
them.
they got cadmium and lead. Those are
Lead.
probably the two worst and most pervasive. lead you got, if you're my age, you got lead from breathing the air during the era when they had lead and gasoline. So, but you get them from everywhere. If you eat, drink, bathe, and breathe, you got heavy metals in you. There's almost no way to prevent them.
Wow. Yeah, and so a lot of environmental toxins, are a big problem that I don't think people are paying enough attention to. And I'm not a worrywart by any stretch of the imagination. However, I do realize that our bodies are sensitive, and I know that when I'm doing the intermittent fasting or our cleansing system, I feel like I can feel the body's cells are tingling. Like it's just, you can feel that it's awakened something. It's a general. You don't need to be a scientist to know that you feel better, right? So it's really interesting to me that you've got your finger on the pulse of kind of really important topics that a lot of people do not know about, and doctors do not talk about this kind of thing at all.
No, they generally don't feel that it's a problem, but
right, because that's what
and
they're
it
being
isn't
taught.
for some people,
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I also wrote a book with a prison inmate called Sex and the Serial Killer, My Bizarre Times with Robert Durst. And this guy from prison knew this guy who's most likely the wealthiest serial killer ever in America, Robert Durst, whose family owns probably half of New York in real estate. And that's been a very interesting story.
And how did you meet Robert Durst? I didn't
meet Robert Durst. I met this guy. He goes by the name of William Steele because he's in prison. And if anybody knew that he was revealing certain things in prison, they'd kill him. So,
oh, right. Jeez. Okay.
His pseudonym is William Steele. And it's a little bit of a long story. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but I initially met him because I was a foreman of a trial for, it was a murder trial in Palm Beach. And he was kind of a prison snitch who testified for the defense about what he had heard in prison. And that helped. It was one of the contributing factors to us declaring the guy not guilty. Okay. And we kept in touch through the years. And it turns out that this guy knew Robert Durst back in the 80s. And they had a very, interesting symbiotic relationship, you might say. But I did want to let you know that I'm going to be at Due South Brewing Company on February 3rd at 4:30 p.m. I'm going to do a book signing, but I'm mainly there to break my month-long beer fast because every year I don't drink for a month. I don't drink beer or any other kind of alcoholic beverage for a month, and it's really healthy for you for a lot of different reasons. It gives your liver a break for one, but it's you lose weight, it improves blood sugar and various other things.
And we call that now, so you've invented this, but it was, you told me you were going to tell me the story about how you invented it, but I'll tell you, you were so ahead of your time, Gary, because now it's called Dry January. And
right. Well, I didn't know he'd do it in January. It actually started back in the mid 80s. I was living with my parents in Fort Lauderdale, and I was writing a book, a novel, and crashing with them and playing rugby. And my mom was convinced, because of all the beer I was drinking, that I was an alcoholic. And she bet me a nickel I couldn't go a month without drinking. So I actually chose February 17th to March 17th because February is the shortest month, and March 17th is St. Patty's Day, which is probably the best drinking day of the year. But as the years progressed, it found out we had a rugby tournament during that time frame, and there was also a Renaissance festival during that time frame. All things that I can't do without drinking beer. So I switched it to January because my drinking schedule in January is pretty open. So now I do it in January, which is a little bit longer, but it doesn't interfere so much with my social life.
Right,
so
right.
I'm gonna break my fast on February 3rd. It's a Wednesday.
And where is this brewing company? Due South?
Yeah, Due South Brewing in Boynton Beach.
Oh, okay. I'm coming.
It's a local brewery. They got very, very good beer. The guy who is the branding manager, his name's Farrell. I forget his first name.
We just need to know the name of the company where we're going to meet. Comment below if you're going to come meet us there.
Yeah, Doug Farrell. And I knew Doug Farrell because he worked for the tabloids too. And his dad, Ray Farrell, was the photo guy for the Enquirer, and I knew him really well. So
Fun.
I'm going to sit down. I'm going to sit down with Doug and have a little chat and break my beer fast. Should be fun.
Yeah, that sounds fun. I definitely would love to join you there, and anybody that wants to come from the area. We have a lot of friends that love to have an excuse to drink in February.
Yeah, right.
I love this dry January though. I've been dry Januarying it for several odd reasons, but it's been working out. And honestly, I think after talking to you, and again, following what you do, so sometimes I feel like there's so much information out there that people don't believe certain things. And I realize we always have to give our little quotations of this might, all things vary and everybody's different. It might not work for you because, you know, the FDA is all on top of that. But what I think is more important to say is when you see someone that is doing something that's working, generally following the pattern of what that person is doing is where it's going to work. So, you know, I look at your lifestyle and I've watched you, you know, in action with your Monday cleansing. And how is it, can I ask how old you are now?
I just turned 67 in November.
67. Last I knew, you were still playing rugby with the boys and, you know, very agile. No kidding. Oh yeah, that I love that picture. I almost used that actually on our thing. I looked at that earlier.
I actually retired from full contact about a year and a half ago because I just had too many concussions. And I had one in the rugby tournament back then where I lost memory for a couple minutes. And
wow,
that's doing a lot of damage to your brain. And over the years, 40 years of rugby, I got my bell rung quite a bit. Nowadays, they keep you out for a week. Back then, we'd shake our head and get back in the game.
Right, right.
I just don't want to take any chances of doing any more brain damage because with brain damage, you always forget where you leave your beer. Or you might forget your beer recipes.
You know? Right? Oh my goodness. Yes, I know. I've had some of your home brew. It's amazing. But so my point is that following the lead of someone that is actually walking the walk, talking the talk, and doing what works for them, and just them sharing that recipe to success, I feel like it's a no-brainer to buy the book. You can go online, look below, it's in our link, and check out that book, The Beer Diet, How to Drink Beer and Not Gain Weight. And it's an actual tutorial step by step. It is entertaining. It's got the way to do this process that's worked for you that will very likely work for a lot of other people. So walking the walk, talking the talk, I can tell you Gary does that because he is fit as a fiddle and 67, sharp as a whip or sharp as a knife, quick as a whip. And still, I mean, you might not be doing contact rugby, but frankly, most of us aren't even running. So you're good. You're good. You're very, very, very good.
I do play touch with these kids who are, from teenagers up to close to my age.
It's wild.
But, I will say one thing, the beer diet is based on a true story. That's the best way to put it.
Okay, I love it. Based on a true story. I recommend it. I recommend everything Gary has written. I'm excited to share with you guys because the man is brilliant in so many different directions. He has his hands in a lot of different pots. He's been around a while. He's learned a lot of things and he's willing to share it with us. So truly on my recommendation, I feel 100% 5 stars. I would recommend your book and everybody grabbing it. And I hope that you let us know when it helps you because we really like that feedback. We do. Okay, well, it has been so much fun, Gary. I hope they go, let me see the book cover one more time. The Beer Diet, How to Drink Beer and Not Gain Weight. I'm Shelby. You're fabulous. I'll see you on the next Shelby Live. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you so much, Shelby.
Thank you so much. And don't forget, I want to connect on social with you. Facebook, Shelby Frenette, shelbylive.com. And we have Instagram, Solo Travel Expert. And of course, Solo Travel TV, YouTube. And LinkedIn, Shelby Frenette. I'm Shelby. You're fabulous. I'll see you on social.